So as we are, let's go ahead and share the screen here. Okay, so for the literature review, wanting to just point out a few things. This is going to be the biggest bulk. I mean, because of all of the sections, the introduction is oftentimes like the 2 to 3 pages, whereas the literature review itself is around 5 to 7, with the amount of research you guys have done. A lot of literature reviews are more in the 3 to 5 range, but with the amount of research you're doing, it's honestly, even if you were to do this, the professional, like dissertation oriented, is 3 to 5. And it might sound odd that I'm saying, but I'm going to give you a little bit of a break and give you 5 to 7. It is easier to write 5 to 7 pages of all of that information than to literally condense all of it and apply all of it to make those kind of connections and everything into a literature review. Like in a dissertation, oftentimes people take the whole sabbatical to write the proposal and the literature review. And that's oftentimes like 3 to 6 months. So to keep in mind, I'm not going to require, so I know it might sound like more work, 5 to 7, but it honestly makes it a little easier because you can write a little bit more and not have to work so hard to condense it into 3 to 5. So, so sounds weird, but I promise you, at least usually every year, I get, how can I fit all of this into 7 pages? Like I need to write more. And so it's a struggle to even get it condensed into 5 to 7. So if you do less than 5 and you cover everything that is necessary, I'm not going to count off. If you do more than 7, I will count off.
You said he's doing 10.
I know, that's it, yeah. Okay.
I always shoot for the low number. It never happens.
Well, shoot for the low number so that you get 7. Yeah.
That's a low number.
Yeah.
7 is a low number.
Yeah.
It's not.
It is funny.
You know what? My
Des
human
and
growth paper was the max amount it could be. And
what?
My human growth paper was the max page limit that you gave
Yeah.
us. And that was because I cut off 5 pages.
Yeah, you were nice because there's some people who don't cut out any pages. Give me like 45 pages. I forgot who that was that last year. I remember whoever it was, the last time I taught it, it was like 45 pages and they didn't do it correctly at all. Like, didn't, and I'm like,
You gave us, like,
I know.
all we had to do is fill in
I know.
our information.
I think people just think that I'm just like, oh, these are just options. I'm like, no, I'm literally telling you what I'm going to grade on and what the expectation. Anyways, okay, literature review. There was something else I was going to say, but hopefully it'll come back to me. 5 to 7. And so part of the literature review, the main point is it tells the reader, that you are well read and have really looked into the issue. Okay. I know that this process, which will feel like it goes on and on and on, you will think that you're right in a writing course. Well, you are. This is your, and well, both of these courses are intensive writing courses, but first and foremost, it is making you an expert in the field. It's illustrating how others have struggled through the same questions you are currently wrestling with. That number 2 is basically your discussion section. Okay. So when you think, like, in your mind, that's what really in the discussion section, you're going to be articulating that point. Okay. Because the literature review has its own discussion section and you're going to be discussing the issues that other research has had, not necessarily in the treatments. Okay. It can be, but keep in mind, this is predominantly going to be your disorders and your demographic, like all of the issues and struggles and problems around your diagnosis or issue. Okay. And so a lot of this is writing, then that discussion section is going to be like, what problems have other researchers come up against? Where are you seeing patterns? What are you seeing? Like 5 articles are saying this similar thing. Okay. Yours should be a breeze. Your discussion section actually might be a little bit longer than, or even 2. Some of yours, you might actually even do a research or 2 articles on the taking out of the hyperactive sexual disorder and how like the problems now. So maybe even searching something that's a little bit maybe more specific to that struggle, but to write, so that discussion section, that's gotta be in there of how difficult it's been for you. So this is the time, you don't get to say I, you don't get to say me, right? But through research, you're going to articulate in the discussion section of the literature review of what difficulties have you come up against in research, okay? Where has there been a lack? Where has, again, what I wouldn't give to have chosen, and it's going to be difficult, Clara, as I'm sure you're already realizing, there's going to be difficult aspects, but in the realm of the literature review and the discussion section, like yours is probably honestly going to be maybe the easiest because there's a lot.
Yeah.
So probably also on yours, especially even how can you, this is something to think about for ODD. Originally, the research was geared towards teenagers with ODD. After doing searching for research on that demographic, there was a lack of research in that area. Therefore, the research switched to focusing on children with ODD to hopefully work on it here before it gets to, does that make sense? So that kind of like switch even in your research, okay, is like, this is the place for you to articulate that, is in that discussion section. Now, I'm talking about the last half of the literature review for the first, but that's what that number 2 is talking about, okay? Then you are helping to summarize and synthesize. Synthesize is a really stupid academic word. I'm recording this. Is like a really nice, helpful, wonderful word that we have to in the academic world use at a 400 level course. Synthesize just means now I'm taking what I know and I'm applying it, okay? So you're helping to summarize and then apply what you have learned to what has been discovered, okay? So similar, like, okay, Clara, you're taking what you've learned from your research as well as maybe human sexuality and applying it to it, and then applying that, mixing that with how you are going to articulate the information, right? Because I would say in yours, you can, and this is the problem with a lot of research, is I can take bits and pieces of it and then speak to what I want it to say, versus due to knowing our culture, knowing what our culture, the depravity of, especially with pornography and what it's, and maybe even in particular, well, I know that's not the track you're going, so it doesn't really matter what type of pornography. Pornography as a whole, it's being so infiltrated into where that's actually beneficial and should be, right? Then you're also battling culture, where a lot of research articles about it, because even in teaching 5 years ago, I could find so many articles
there's
about
a lot that's like 2
and like 8 and 9. I was like, oh.
Yeah.
Or like 7
And again, I'm willing to be a little more flexible on yours just because of
I
the
think
fact.
there's like one that's like a 2009 that I thought was good. I figured, well, it's only a year. That's
Yeah.
probably okay.
Yeah. Just because of the nature of your subject and your issue, the issue that you're doing, because our culture in the last 5 years, now I can barely find any research that talks about it. Because, and there is a book that was produced and published about how, actually from a Ivy League counselor of how, like, even in research or her even doing counseling, what she's required to allow and to do, and just to promote, you know, is just, and she's not a Christian, but she's also like, that's not actually beneficial. And it's all within the sexual realm of things. But how, like, she can't get any of her articles published.
Well, it's interesting because in a lot of the articles, they all talk about like how therapists are saying, oh, well, we don't really know how to deal with this. Like I don't even really think they understand what they're doing. Like,
Oh yeah.
how are you supposed to deal with this if you're saying it's a good thing and yet people are coming in with problems?
Yeah. And it's destroying marriages. Yeah. ASEC, Association of Sexual ASTA. There is a an actual licensing. There's only one place to get sex certification through. And again, it has even shifted, but I wonder, AASECT, AASECT. Be interesting just to see, because we're not really, I mean, as a marriage and family therapist, we, more than any other field, has more training in it, but we have a like 3-week, I think it got extended to maybe 4 weeks in this class, in this now. That's not enough on that, which every single couple I see, sex is a big issue. Every individual I see that is married and comes for help within something, sex is either affecting or this is affecting that. And so it's a huge thing in a lot of areas, but yeah. Okay. And I think about even through the depression, particularly with Black men. Is there, what are the articles talking about specifically to men? How, like, this is, maybe these articles are talking more men in workplace or men in relationships. Some may be talking about the etiologies, the causations of. Are there some, was it difficult to find it, depression in Black men or just men, walking through a lot of that? Did you have any articles that talked about like persistent depressive disorder, or what used to be called dysthymia versus major depressive disorder?
But I also didn't like type that in.
Yeah. It's two different disorders, but it's very interesting on major depressive disorder. When you look at criteria, it technically isn't meant to have lasted very long. It's meant to be like, I'm in a rough like season, like a month, 2 weeks, or a month, and I can't get out. So it's meant to be like a 3-month treatment or less. Whereas if this is ongoing or prolonged, then it's more pervasive, persistent depressive disorder, which used to be called dysthymia. Which I think is funny, in the DSM-5 it still puts in parentheses dysthymia. But I was just curious if it ever referred to either one of those. Not that you need to research that, because that'll take you a whole whole bunny trail. No, I would just out of curiosity. Okay. Fourth, informing your own hypothesis and methodology so that you do not make the same mistakes and can build off of what has already been learned. This is as if you were to do your individual research. This would be almost informing others. So think about it not necessarily like this is something would be as if you were to do like research methods, like if you were to do your own experiment, the literature review is your hypothesis and methodology is informing. But think about this in this way of like, the literature review is going to inform these sections so that others who may actually do a experiment, you're doing a comparative analysis, and if they were to do an experiment, what would you, like, you're informing them of what to do, not to do, how to do it, the pluses, minuses, okay? Wanting to read through these, a lot of people really screw things up in the literature review. Here are a few things. Yeah, literature review, man, people are like home run or like.
Zena told me that she cried when she got hers back. Or when she was
Who?
Zena. She was like about to cry or did cry whenever she turned it in because she realized she did it all wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a lot to fix and edit for your final paper. Yeah. Okay. This you guys should already know. I'm not going to even go over it a lot, but citing's not a bad thing. Especially in the literature review, there should, outside of your research question, thesis, and hypothesis, there really shouldn't be a sentence that's not cited. Unless you are articulating a connection of information. Like you are articulating the impact that, so here's the fact, here's the statement from this source, and then you are stating how this could impact, or if this isn't, this would be the possibility, or any kind of like informational connection. And then like that next sentence is again driving that home. That's fine, but keep in mind, I would say upwards of the 90% plus of your paper needs to be every sentence cited, because this is a review of all of the literature. I don't care what you think. Like, this isn't the point of putting opinion, then all of this was worth nothing. If that makes sense, okay? At the same time, be careful what you cite. Obviously choosing, that's why I kind of dictated a little bit of the type of articles. So kind of to mitigate this. Of the first couple of years, I said research, and it was amazing. We had maybe 5-10 articles that were scholarly, and everything else was like .coms. So then I put more specifically into it. So making sure like your references are scholarly, they're good. Even if you do have a non-Google Scholar or EBSCOhost source, that it's a .edu, .org, .gov, or a very like reputable .com, like, you know, AAMFT or ASECT. You know, does that make sense? Or like if you were to research Vanderkolk, or if you were to research Dan Siegel, or if you were to research some like from EMDR, EMDRIA, EMDRIA Institute or International Association, there's some sources on that website about PTSD. Well, you're going to like the source. If you're going to go to like parentmanagementtraining.com or something like that, well then that's an okay.com. It's a very okay. Okay. Because number 3, because one person says it does not mean that your search is over. I have read far too many papers that cite one reference over and over and over and over, and simply use one reference to back up the entire introduction or the entire discussion section. Remember that this is a literature review, therefore review all of the literature, not just the writing of one-hit wonders.
if we write a sentence that has like
Yes,
stuff from 2 different sources.
4.
Well,
Yeah.
let's say, like, if I'm saying like it's like an and thing, but the first half is from this article and the second half is from this, do we cite halfway through, or do we do it all at the end in order that it appears?
It is all at the end of, not the order that it appears. It needs to be in the order of
Appearance on reference list?
reference page. Yeah. 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 But I should, in a literature review, please don't cite more than 4 authors. I understand that you might have more, but that just starts to eat up your pages. And then people, like, I'm not kidding you. Last year I had an individual who put so many sources, it took up 3 lines of sources on multiple times. And like, I literally went through, highlighted and deleted all of those, and their paper was 2.5 pages at the end of the day.
How long was it before?
6.
A lot of.
Yeah. So here, like, when you're really wanting to drive a point home, then do that. Those are good things. That, like, you're saying, like, 4 people, 4 research articles are validating. And then again, pick the, like, of the articles. If you have 10 that are saying that, if you're giving me a definition of oppositional defiant disorder, I don't need 4 sources that are backing up that definition. Does that make sense? Like, that would just be silly. Just give me 1. I don't actually give me the DSM. Okay. But if it's a statistic or it's a struggle, like in the discussion section, all 4 of these articles are all saying that this is an issue within the realm of this research. Those are the times to use like 4 sources. Okay. Making sure it's the in-text citation, semicolon, and next one, semicolon, next one, semicolon, and it is in alphabetical order. You don't re-alphabetize the last names. It's literally what is, if I were to look on your references, in what order would they be? Okay. Okay. Reflect back on APA, making sure, again, the language, as you've read, now some articles are more written for publication than they are for research experiments. So you get a little bit of mix, but this isn't fun reading. Claire's like, no.
I disagree.
Like, okay.
I mean, it's not flowery, creative writing, just, grip you into, right? So keep in mind, this isn't meant to, it's not gonna flow like pretty. It's not gonna flow super well. There's not gonna be transitional sentences, okay? So hear that. And I don't want a whole paragraph of fact, as if you're just like, you put them all in bullet points and then you just took all the bullet points out, okay? you do need to articulate how these are connecting, and again, you're paraphrasing. You're telling me what you learned through this, and then you're deciding where that learning came from, okay? So what connections are you making? If you are to write a whole paragraph about who cares about doing research on PTSD, like, welcome, you're one of like 5 million people who do research on PTSD. Who gives a crap? We've heard it enough. Like, oh my gosh, back it up. Like, so in a paragraph, if you were to write like, why does this matter? Like, make that flow, but not in a creative writing. You're still writing academic, scholarly ways.
Essentially what sets your research aside without rainbows and butterflies in it.
Yeah. Like, do you know what the word florid means? It's okay. I don't really either. The point is that this is a scientific endeavor. Your writing should reflect that outcome. This is not the place for creative interpretation or flowery composition. Articulate your thoughts in a concise, specific, clarifying, and scientific way. Okay? This is, guys, I am not expecting you to write at this level. You're not in a doctoral program. I don't want you to write, and trust me, I've had you guys for a while now. I know your writing level individually, and I know your writing style. So I don't want everything to be direct quotes. I'm fine with direct quotes. That's necessary, but don't feel like, don't put like switch adjectives. I would much rather intelligent than some like obscure word that means that. I don't even think about it right now. But like, I don't want obscure word. I mean, smart, difficult, you know, affects this. And again, you're going to have a lot of repetition in how you even word things. And that's, I mean, don't start every sentence the same way, but it's going to make sense that there's a lot of repetition in how you say things. Okay. This is a just redundant. Literature review, as well as the rest of your paper, should be a reflection and culmination of what you learned from all you read, not a copy and paste paper of great insightful parts of the other authors. Yes, cite anything that does not come from your own knowledge. At the same time, this is a capstone research project. It is the time to demonstrate that you can actually learn information from what you've read and then write about it. That's why I really say read it, highlight it, and then read the highlighted parts and then write your annotated bibliography. But like put the article away, then write your annotated bibliography. That practice alone will really re-solidify in your brain what you learned out of the article. I don't want the highlighted piece, like you don't want just every little highlighted piece. Now, there are, if you're like, oh, that statistic, you can put statistic, you know, number sign, number sign, number sign, and then write it, and then come back, and then turn the paper over, and then fill in the exact number. And if there is a direct quote that you really want to pull from there, then type it absolutely word for word. Okay? But as an overall, make sure that you're telling me what you learned. Okay, I've already started going through some of these links and found out that a couple of them are not active anymore. So I'm gonna fix some of those. Okay. Any questions thus far? I'm not going to answer that question. Okay, I'm going to read for you. I'm not going to screenshot this to be able to protect the identity of this individual. But I'm going to read kind of some of the aspects of the literature review for you so that you can maybe get a idea of, and this person, just keep in mind, still had edits, so quite a few edits, but this is a really good, so I'm going to read through and past some of the edits. Okay. Mothers with borderline personality disorder reported the highest level of abuse and negative experiences in childhood. That is the very first sentence of the literature review, which is a really great way to start. Literature review, what is an attention grabbing informational piece to start a sentence? And oftentimes that's a really good place to put a direct quote. This is oftentimes a good place to put like you're opening it up with really what's the disorder and how is it affecting this population? Okay, so if you hear that again, mothers with borderline personality disorder reported the highest level of abuse and negative experiences in childhood. So I'm already like, okay, so we're talking about mothers, we're talking about borderline, and it's already giving some like etiologies. And maybe if we can fix this, then we can fix this kind of thing, okay? And then immediately goes into some definitions. Borderline personality disorder, parentheses, BPD, is defined by pervasive identity issues, mood swings, and unstable relationships. Research has found that 72 to 80% of clinical diagnoses for BPD are in women. Now, I'm going to take a second. The statistical varied there, that's what I would expect probably for most of you guys, because research A is going to say 17% of boys have this. Another one's going to say 9%. Another one's going to say 21%. Now, if most of them are in that like 17 to like 23 or something like that, then maybe that's the range. And we're not going to include the 9%, or you could include, research has said anywhere between 9 and 23% of, and then include all of those research articles that give those statistics. Okay? Does that make sense? So you might not have one research that says 17 to 23, but in a literature review, the bulk of the research or the articles that I'm going to maybe predominantly use say this is the range, or this 2 articles are here, 2 articles, and some are in the middle. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay. Within the United States, 5.9% of Americans are being diagnosed with BPD. Of the 5.9%, 0.2 to 1.8% is the general community, 15 to 25% is among psychiatric inpatient, and 10% is psychiatric outpatient. This disorder affects the person that has BPD as well as the families and friends who are in relationship with this person. Due to the severity of the abuse as a child, the mother, and in some cases the father who has BPD, often negatively affects the children that they are raising. Okay, so it's kind of setting up like the, even a little bit of the cause, but it's setting up definitions, which should always be the very beginning. You want to kind of define terms, so that way when you use the terms, the reader knows what you're referring to. That very first paragraph is a good place to kind of write, if some research refers to it as behavioral disorders, some research defines it as oppositional defiant disorder. For the purpose of this literature review, okay, for the purpose of this literature review, those terms will be like simplified into the term blank will be used to cover those other terms. Or
so like for mine, I could say like the term pornography covers hypersexuality, sex addiction,
yeah,
etc.
Yeah.
And I could just say that I'm going to use pornography to kind of cover. Or are they kind of?
You might want to say like maybe sex addiction, or because if you just say pornography does actually have its own definition. Now you could say pornography for the purpose of this, within the realms of hyperactive sexual disorder, sex addiction, there's a lot of components of those. For the purpose of this paper, it will specifically focus on the use of pornography and the addictive nature, or the effects of pornography addiction in married men. Does that make sense? So because even sex addiction, that covers prostitution, like prostitutes, multiple partners, because some addicts, I don't know, but it could not actually involve pornography per se. It's a component, but it would be as if you have all the criteria and you're saying, this is the criteria I'm focusing on, the impact of pornography on, if that makes sense. But for you to say, like in the DSM-4, it was referred to as this. In the DSM-5, it's no longer there. It is in some communities referred to as sex addiction. You might want to pick a different word than communities, but in some, in other research, it is referred to as sex addiction post, DSM-5, or pornography addiction. For the purpose of this research, it will be focusing primarily on the pornography addiction aspects of those disorders. Does that make sense? Okay. Then moving on to like the second paragraph, this might seem weird, but this is also a sentence you need to write, but you're not going to cite it. Okay. How many articles did you guys have to have total by the end? 30 minimum, right? Okay, keep that in mind. This paper examines 27 articles which have studied the causation of BPD, how it impacts parenting abilities, and the relationships with their children, families, and friends. That is great because you're not going to be using, I've never had it. You might be the first, especially if you have like 38 articles, then you're going to use 31 maybe or whatever, but you're not in a literature review. You're not going to cite every single article and you're not going to use every article. Let's say at the beginning you did research on teenage boys. Well, hopefully you still have some of that, but you're not going to be using that, right? So some of the articles like, oh, I thought this was neat, but it's not really applying to where I'm wanting to go with all of this. Or I have 6 other articles that say the same thing and I don't need this one, okay? Maybe this is older, maybe this isn't as reputable, whatever. Does that make sense? So, but you do need to indicate how many articles that you are doing the literature review over, okay? That's probably put that in with some number symbols, like your pound sign, the hashtag symbol. This paper examines blank articles because finish your paper, putting all the references on, and then count. Does that make sense? Okay. Because if you put 27 articles and I go to your reference page and you have 17, one, that's going to be really bad. 2, there's some discrepancies, okay? But you're also going to, these articles they examine a lot of things, but what are you going to be pulling primarily from these articles? So if you see, she wrote about these articles studied the causation, so the etiologies, what leads to borderline, how it impacts parenting abilities, and then the relationships with their children, families, and spouses, or friends, sorry. Okay, so those are just the 3 things that she focused on in her paper to really to help organize her literature review. Okay, you're gonna need at least 3. You can have maybe 3 to 5, but you're gonna need at least 3 to, that's just, again, you read a lot of articles. Hopefully you can see some common themes of what are some of the things that all of the literature talks about with ODD? How does it impact the family dynamics? How does it impact the kid at school? How does it impact their, and their likelihood of developing conduct disorder later in life, right? Or in a few years. Okay. So if PTSD is not managed, so the impacts on alcoholism, the impact and the likelihood of suicide or inability to keep a job or loss of families, or, you know, what are the things that the literature is all talking about? Does that make sense? Okay. Due to this need, okay, so now we're still in that second paragraph, but we're going to be talking about, okay, what's the need for doing, okay, well, due to this need, like, because I just said here how it impacts and all the things, due to this need for this kind of research, this comparative analysis will compare mentalization-based therapy and dialectical behavior therapy for building stronger interpersonal relationships between children and parents who have, between children and parent who have, that was poorly worded, but that's where you're going to put like that, this compare analysis, that thesis statement, you know, it'll compare what, okay. This will be accomplished through building better coping mechanisms, mentalization abilities, mindfulness practices, and coping type. And then it is, so that's a research question, thesis, and hypothesis. Okay. That is the introduction of the literature review. Okay. So, and hopefully, as you know, or maybe see, some of your articles do literally say introduction. A lot of them just start writing, okay? So it's going to be similar. So you're going to have your paper and your I don't know if APA, okay. You're just going to start writing. Here's your introduction, okay? Here's about 3 paragraphs, 3 to 4 paragraphs that should, okay? So you're defining terms, you're giving some statistics, you're explaining why this is important, what it's going to be, if this research isn't done, what could happen, so everything we just talked about. That's going to be your introduction, which is basically kind of like, if you think about it, it's kind of almost like a very skeleton outline for your introduction, the introduction to your whole, okay? This is simply an introduction to the literature review. So it is going to be different, but this is a good kind of a beginning. You're going to build from that in your actual paper, okay? Then you have literature review. Okay, so that's centered. It doesn't look like it, but it's centered. Okay. So then your literature review. So do you remember how she stated they're going to look at the causations of BPD, and then let me go back to that. And then how it impacts parenting abilities, and then the relationships of someone diagnosed with BPD and their family, their spouses, their children, friends, things like that, their relationships, okay? So then the literature review is going to break those 3 to 5 things down. So what does the literature say about the causations of? And really, we should have, all of us should have that as one of them. I know that some of your literature may not refer to that, like what's leading to, but if it does, that's a pretty basic, it's a pretty one that's all literature reviews usually have, is this, what is the cause of, okay? What leads to. Okay, so then you're going to write a paragraph or so about that. Then you're going to break down, what does the literature say about all of the, you know, again, you can write a couple of paragraphs, a couple of, but one of even the remarks that I made on her paper is it wasn't super clear that what paragraphs were covering which thing, Okay, so you can put extra headings on here or just make it a little bit clearer in the wording that I'm covering. Like literally her first paragraph is covering the causation, and then her very last is opens up with genetic predispositions. And I'm like, that's a causation thing. So that needed to be brought up back here. And it kind of seemed a lot of like, oh, she wrote about this. Oh, she wrote about this. It wasn't laid out. It wasn't. Does that make sense? Okay.
So even though it's not like MLA writing, you still like it should still be ordered to it basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For some people, if it just helps, this is really all that I want to be careful. This is all that really technically should be there. Okay. If you want to, this isn't going to be, I'm not giving brownie points even. I'm not going to see it as a positive, and I'm not going to see it as a negative. Just know in the back of your head, but I mean, if you ever do go on to a doctorate level kind of stuff, don't do this. Okay. For you guys, if it helps in this, you can use those second level headings of putting like, please don't put causations, but etiologies. I mean, this is going to show me that you know the scientific terminology for causations. You can write causations. I would prefer etiologies. Huh?
And then just delete it.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Yeah. If you're just writing, thank you. That's a really great idea. Like literally put this and then write all of the paragraphs, the 2 to 3 or so of etiologies, you know, because if you're going to write about genetic and then you're going to write about environment, because what are the 3 parts? What are the 3 parts to etiologies?
Biopsychosocial.
Thank you. The biopsychosocial. So biological, genetics, physiology. So what are the physiological components to depression?
Serotonin.
Right, lack of serotonin. So, but again, you know that, but if like, Tania, if your research does not talk about the lack of serotonin or anything like that, don't put it. What is your research saying is leading to, okay? And so, but what biological etiologies, what psychological, so thinking processes, and then what environmental, social, what outside impacts, so parenting, you know, the parenting, family, environment, poverty, education, military. Those are going to be the social outside environmental circumstances that lead to, you know, trauma, right? Okay. So making sure that that's a really great way to organize your etiologies. Start with the biological, then go to psychological, then go to social. That's just okay. And then you're going to go to what's the other of the 3 to 5 things that you have already declared are the things that your literature review is going to be looking at. Think of it as like, what are some of the common themes you see present in a lot of the literature? Do a lot of your literature, or do 4 articles talk about the do 4 articles specifically talk about, because I know one of yours was the impact of the depression in Black men, that impact on marriages, you know, or parenting, you know, like, okay, then that would be one of your things that you then discuss, you know, if you have a few articles. Does that make sense?
So mine talk about like pretty like common through all of them. There's 2 different theories about why there's a lot of like there could be an AUD diagnosis with PTSD.
Yeah.
Especially in combat veterans. But so there's two different theories behind it. One is like a self-medicating theory, and one is a, what is it called? I can't remember what it's called, but it's like they both like feed into each other, so they make each other worse, and they self. I can't remember what it's called, but would that go into like the ideologies of it then? Like those theories about why?
What could lead to it?
Yeah.
Can be. I mean, yeah, because so GP for yours, if none of your research refers to biological components of that, then you don't make up things.
Mutual maintenance, self-medicating.
Mutual maintenance.
Yeah, it's been one of the most like common themes for it's like they believe it's one of those two can like continually between those two, and then one of them actually addressed four of them. One of them is social drinking and reintegration.
Yeah, mutual maintenance.
But that's been like the least.
I could only imagine, but I bet it's what the military uses is the most, maybe.
In the military, it's still self-medicating. Like
Okay, they
self-medicating
do
or
recognize that.
social-medicating.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so, yeah. Again, I don't want to be like, this is absolutely, but things to think about. Does any of your literature look at those things? Okay. Then you're going to, you have the literature review. Okay. Whee. Okay. Then you're going to have discussion. Okay. Now the discussion is, like, for example, let me just read you this isn't going to, you're talking like a page really per section. Okay. So the discussion section is going to be about 2 pages, 2 to 3, 2 pages. Okay. Really should be. Okay. If you think about the introduction should be a page, and then your literature review, you're looking at 2 to 3, and then your discussion section should be about 2. Okay. So, and then a paragraph at the end, but we're going to talk about that. Okay, so let me just read you to the beginning of the discussion, kind of give you just a little bit of an idea of what that sounds like. Researchers studied the different ways that interpersonal relationships are impacted by BPD. That is a statement I don't need to cite. Does that make sense? Like, because you're doing a comparative analysis, you're doing a literature review. So like researchers studied, you're just making the statement that they've obviously stated, right? Okay, the individuals with BPD are often unaware of their diagnosis and do not realize the impact and effect that they have on their family and friends around them. These individuals often struggle with feeling understood and feel as, wow, there's some grammar issues, feel as if they are alone in their own head and no one else will understand the intensity of their emotions. And I did not even edit that. Due to the trauma, these individuals experience, due to the trauma that these individuals experience during childhood, they are unable to establish strong relationships without a deep fear of rejection. This then creates the cycle of wanting a deep relationship yet destroying it because of the fear of rejection. Individuals with BPD struggle with emotional instability, which then create a negative environment for families and persons with BPD. These negative attributes, okay. So in the discussion, you do want to like, what are some of the things, what I think she was kind of leading into a little bit here, just kind of got a little long-winded and maybe a little bit of rabbit trail. Then she comes back because she's about ready to get into the point. But what are some of the things that hinder, like for borderlines, the fact that, again, it's a personality disorder. So most personality disorders don't think that they have a problem because that's their reality, right? And so you want to maybe, what are some of the things that your research has maybe indicated as what hinders Black men from getting help? What are some of the things that are maybe even in the culture, whether it be as a whole, as a culture, or within their culture, that are holding them back? Which is, again, a thing of discussion. What are the things that are impacting for people to maybe not get correct diagnoses, to maybe not go get help? Okay, military. Like, I did even further research, and it's amazing how if you have pretty much any mental health disorder within the past like 2 to 3 years prior to going to, and some, if you've ever had this and this kind of disorder, you won't be able to get into any military, which is frustrating.
And a lot of it can be swept under the rug. Like there's a lot of people in the military who, if they were to strictly follow that, would not be in the military. And like, because I know people in the military that have autism and have been diagnosed with autism.
Okay.
By like license.
Yeah. So it may be like, if you're that smart and that physically able, we might overlook it. But I think about, like, in particular, there's a few women or not that physically there yet, men who are wanting to, when they graduate, go into the military, and they're like, they were asking because they are wanting to get counseling and with this effect. And like, so, but even the culture of military, how do they help, promote, or is it looked down upon? Okay.
Like in the next 10 years, a lot of that's going to be changing.
I am sure as heck hoping, because they've got to do something with their suicide rate.
It's gone up. Even in the Air Force, which is the lowest rate of PTSD of any branch.
Yeah.
It's gone up significantly. Like in January alone, there's like 27 suicides.
Yeah.
And that was before stuff got bad, and there hasn't been any release since the time the
Right.
heat of the Air
Well, because right now, if anyone commits suicide, it's all related to COVID, regardless of, don't get me started on that. But how does culture impact your ability to even do the research or the interpretation of research, right? So does that make sense? So what are the things that are impacting? How does culture, how does the diagnosis in and of itself difficult, you know? I even think about, like, Jess, goodness gracious, what are the things that are impacting parents taking their kids to ODD? Well, I don't want to be blamed. I don't want to be taken to social services. I don't want to be, I'm a horrible parent. A lot of things. And I don't want to have to work, fix my child. Okay. So there's discussion sections, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in depth, these sections here, because our time's almost up. Then there's going to be limitations of these studies. So this can be just limitations. Now, this is a second level heading, okay, of discussion section. So limitations of, you can literally say limitations of these studies, or just limitations of research. These studies, however you want to word that. It can be just this or more, okay? Don't put both of these, just pick one. Okay? Yeah, limitations of research, these studies, okay? And then you're going to, at the very end, so this is like, think about this as a page, this is a page, and then you're going to have finally a, about, this literally should be a paragraph, okay? This is conclusions. And I think it's needs for further, and future study. This can, let's just do this, because that way it helps when we do our discussion section, okay? conclusion and future study. Okay, so concluding, what are the like, to fully comprehend what it is like to help someone with BPD, it will be important to understand the reasoning behind their behavior. BPD is a pervasive disorder that often makes the person seem irrational, intolerant, and clingy. This disorder can cause someone to become an extremist in emotion and not tolerable. Future studies should include the importance of validation for someone with BPD and how to better support their families. Other research should include how to better educate families on this disorder, implement more clinics for families to be able to receive help, and learn how to break the stigma of BPD. Now, I will say that with that whole entire paragraph, she didn't cite one single sentence in the conclusion, which is problematic. Okay, that's problematic. Because it's still like, you can conclude kind of like tied up in a pretty little bow. Like what she said isn't bad. It's just, it's like what are some of the, again, just as we're still kind of in the discussion section, but we're also kind of tying everything in. So it's really hard to determine what leads to. It's very difficult in our culture to, like, there's this marriage app that I've been seeing if this is something I want to give to my clients, recommend to my couples that I see. And there's a question and answer section that they have open to anyone. Okay, I'm a bad example because I'm actually a licensed marriage and family therapist, but let's say you, as single, can get on and give people advice on these things. And it's amazing how many things on there are all about pornography. My partner is watching pornography. I'm, like, why do, all of these things. And it's amazing how many people, I mean, it's probably on there because it's a marriage app. There's a lot more predominant for giving really good suggestions or validating, like, this is really hard. But then there's some that are like, that's not a bad thing. Like, it's really great. It really adds to the marriage. Like, you just need to change your perspective on it. If you think of it in a positive way, it can really help, And so, like, what are the impacts of culture? What are the impact, people's perception of that? And I don't believe, because it's not. I have actually probably half and half of couples who don't have any faith background or don't like that. They don't adhere to any of that. Not their decisions or whatever, or their reactions or responses to pornography are not due to a religious moral compass, and then some are. And so yeah, what is impacting our ability to do studies like this? Okay. And then what should more, according to the discussion sections of your research, what does your discussion section say is that there's going to be a section usually that says needs for further research. Okay. When you do your big discussion section, your real discussion section in your paper, then like in your final paper, there will be a whole section called needs for further research. Okay. So again, we're just kind of starting to dive, this should really just be a paragraph, but this is like her beliefs of what more research needs to be done on, which is, I could say, is informed, but I don't know that it's informed. Okay. I don't want your opinions about what you think needs to be done or where it needs to go. I need research to tell me, like, that this is what the research has been telling you needs to be done in the future. Does that make sense? Okay. And then that's the end of the literature review, then your reference page. Okay. But that's the headings for you. Is that, and I did record this. Before I stop recording, is there any other questions, comments, concerns that you have for this section? or I know that was a lot of information, a lot of things. Again, this is why I recorded it. So you can go back and you can listen to it and just double check, whatever. But come Tuesday, you know, with, I mean, you don't have to start on this by any means. Make sure, focus on your annotated bibliography. That's what's coming up, right? So again, actually on Tuesday, I want to see whether you have one source or you have 25. I want to see your annotated bibliographies. Okay. I want to make sure that they're started Tuesday.
Okay, I don't know if you meant Thursday when you said Tuesday. Oh wait, today is Thursday, right? No, I just thought today was Tuesday.
Oh, okay. I was like, I think we have class on Tuesday. So, okay. So make sure that, like, on your computer, so I will enable share screen where JP, you can share your document onto the screen. Huh?
I can show you it now.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Okay, great.